Hello and welcome to The Dream. Today with me I have Coach Sly Fox. How are you doing, Cyrus?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Not too bad. So your line of work was in Latin America South with Born to Kill and is now currently working in the Latin America North Challenger Series with PEX Gaming. Is that correct?
Yeah, PEX team is a revived organization. They were an LLN team in 2014.
Gotcha.
And the project is being revived by Yuri, who was the mid laner on PEX back in 2014.
Gotcha.
And is continuing that now.
All right. So I guess my first line question would be, why did you decide to go to Latin America South and Latin America North? What brought you to there?
That's a tough question. It was more of I had the opportunity to, and because I had the opportunity to, it became something that I had to consider. And I felt that if I was going to make it in the coaching scene, it would be better the more experience that I had and the better experience that I had. And working in the pro league in any region is still respectable,
Right.
I believe.
Right. And now, so your first one was in Latin America South. That's a big change in it. And I wanted to ask you, have you noticed, like, is there a major cultural difference in terms of the way they approach League of Legends compared to how it is in NA or how it is in Latin America North, or is it still pretty similar across the regions?
There are differences. There are big differences. I think that a large part of Latin American culture is still trying to get past the idea that it's not just a game, that it's being treated as a sport, and because it's being treated as a sport, you need to put a lot of work into it, and you should respect people that do put a lot of work into it. If Latin American Latin American countries can like reach that point of like cultural acceptance, then the regions could probably flourish a lot more than they have. Latin America South is a little bit further ahead because they're not such a top-heavy region. They have a lot of talent, and it's spread out. But as for Latin America North, they're such a top-heavy region, and there's a lot of players in Latin America North who probably could be pro, but just can't because they have issues with their family or issues with their schooling that won't allow them to work towards reaching those goals, even if they want them.
Gotcha.
I'm not too familiar with the scene in Brazil, but I wouldn't believe that it's much different there. At least not much different than Latin America South. I know Brazil is not very top heavy, a little bit top heavy, but not too top heavy.
Yeah. So did that kind of cultural acceptance make it difficult for you to break into those scenes, break into Latin America South and Latin America North, and make a name for yourself in those regions?
Difficult. It's hard for me to say that. My first experience with a Latin American team was with Creda Gaming back in 2016 in the first CDL of that year. Who I met some good people, and I think what I did was I guess I impressed them with my work, right? Because at some point in the following year, it was all the way in January of 2017, where I got contacted by someone who I was working with from that team. And they gave me the offer to be the analyst for B2K. And when I took that position and we won CDL, it just kind of turned into a transition. Like, oh, I'm no longer really thinking about North America or staying within my region because it doesn't seem to be an issue. The only thing that isn't as comforting is if when I return to North America, it's the money is not really as comparable. But if I was really in it for the money, then I don't think I would be as good of a coach.
Gotcha. So, kind of an add-on to that question would be: so you said it wasn't too difficult to break into Latin America, but do you think it's a good choice to go and get the experience in Latin America? Or do you think if people have something kind of going in North America, they should stick it out there? Or do you think more people should reach for the opportunities in the wildcard regions?
I think people should reach for the opportunities in the wildcard regions. Not only are you gaining experience in your profession, you are gaining a cultural experience that should better yourself. I think I learned so much about myself and how I should act and discipline through my experience in Chile, in Latin America South. And I think that has made me much better of a person. And I definitely will be doing better in the future, and I'm not backing down now. And I think that you can gain that from a lot of different regions. It's more about whichever region that someone's interested in, they should definitely apply.
Gotcha. So, what do you think they should do if they're trying to apply? What do you think is needed if you're going to try and join one of these other regions?
One of two things. You need either it depends. If you're gonna try and go into Challenger Series in another region, as long as you have some experience, you may be able to get one of those positions, or at least get on trial for one of those positions. But the other requirement is that you should probably go with a region that you can at least understand their language at a proficient level. See, it's not an issue for me because I speak Spanish pretty well. I'm even able to explain a lot of league concepts in Spanish. I can do some lecture in Spanish. But if I wasn't able to do that, then there are concepts that probably I wouldn't have gotten to explain, especially in a remote position when being on trial. So if you do have some expertise in a language, maybe you should target that region. Now, if that language happens to be Korea or China, like, that's unlucky. But you can still attempt to go for a Challenger Series team in one of those regions. If all you have to do is you have to have a lot of determination and you have to have a lot of discipline. You need to make a portfolio that shows your expertise and shows what your skills are and highlights your skills. And you need to be very honest about what skills you do not have. Because if you're very upfront like that, people are willing to work with you. People are willing to listen to what you have to say, and they're willing to help you in the areas as long as you're willing to get help. And that's something you should probably need as well.
And I think that's interesting. That's not usually brought up, like what you need to showing on a resume, what you need to improve on, because usually people are like, "I'll just hide that up and try and get by anyways." But that adds to another question: what do you think the requirements are? Do you think this is around like a Challenger Series level if you're talking about Latin America South and Latin America North professional? Do they compare to like a academy level nowadays? Do you think that's a fair comparison for skill?
It's hard to say. I think that the top tier Latin American South teams and Latin American North teams can beat maybe the lower tier North American LCS teams. It's getting rough with all of the crazy roster changes that have been happening in NA.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to measure now that so much has changed.
Right.
For season 8. But I mean, CDL is not really comparable. Like I like with when I'm going to CDL and PEX, the project for PEX was kind of revived in with an interesting sense of looking at the CDL for the previous split
Mm-hmm.
in LAN and realizing that the CDL in these regions are very, very, very far behind. Like CDL in LAN there might be one or two teams that could do pretty well against academy teams other than PEX in NA, but the other three teams, I don't know if I could say that for them. And as for the CDL and LAS, maybe there are one or two teams that could beat academy teams, but there's just so much missing. There's a lot of fundamentals missing in these regions for the Challenger Series, and not only because I mean, you kind of can expect that because the population of high skill players in these regions and high skill staff in these regions is much lower. Like if you look at how many people play on NA and then how many people play on LAS, you can just expect LAS to have much less talent, and that's kind of why LAS generally has less teams in their series.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that is kind of an interesting thing to think about, because if you're saying, some of the top four teams can really work in the they can compete with some of the LCS teams or some of the academy teams, that could be a really good place for young coaching staff to go and train there and get comparable level skill practice and really make it to the level that they're looking at.
Any kind of there's this kind of predetermined notion that a lot of people have where the level of the teams that you're working with has something to do with your skill as a support staff. And frankly, that's just not true. Your level as a support staff member is very, very directly linked to, is the team improving under your supervision? And if the team is improving under your supervision visually, that's impressive, especially over short periods of time.
Right.
Because you're not, I forget how this was explained to me once, but you're not just teaching them the game. You're not just trying to explain to them what they need to do. You're training them to perform actions in a sequence, like in a specific sequence, and you kind of want them to function like a computer. And to get a person to do that, it takes a lot of mental strain, and then and training someone to work through that mental strain and then perform well through that mental strain is a very difficult task. So if someone is completing it, whether it's slowly or very quickly, that has to be taken into account. If a team is not improving under your supervision at all, if a team starts to plateau, then I think that will say a lot. So I don't want to tell people who are interested in coaching in other regions or being an analyst in other regions to try and jump into positions maybe they're not ready for, because you want to be really careful.
Right.
It's difficult to say whether or not someone is ready to be in one of these positions, because it's a very endemic profession to the League of Legends scene. Um, Now, there are some people who are very well studied in the areas of logic, philosophy, mathematics, game theory, and sports psychology,
Mm-hmm.
um, who have been bringing this kind of formal and uh, educated look to League of Legends, that their perspective. And I've been trying to do that myself with mathematics and game theory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would suggest like some kind of formal training, or at least maybe working under some of these people who are respectable, because there a lot of these other regions are very open, or at least I've had a very good experience with everyone in the LAS region. All of the coaches and players from the other teams always treated me with a lot of respect, um, and always sought to answer my questions and talk to me. And I'm sure they would be open to working with you if you wanted to provide help, like as a volunteer,
Mm-hmm.
and gaining some kind of experience in that way to maybe try and prepare yourself before you jump into a position that you've never had before, especially an in-house position. Like if you've never left North America before and you're moving to Australia or something,
Yeah.
it's going to be a big jump. Things are going to change. You have to be really ready for it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any last words for any aspiring analysts or coaches? Any last suggestions that you might have?
Figure out what your role is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are lots of different roles in the support staff circle. People are positional coaches, people are strategic coaches, people are stats analysts, people are objective analysts, um, people are constantly looking for relationships between um, the variables in the game, and trying to empirically discover rules or true knowledge about the
Mm-hmm.
game, because the game really is just a set of um, variables over time. So it can be picked apart. So maybe you should try and look for some formal training, whether it be going to your local community college, whether it being staying in college and taking like a sports psychology class, or um, a linear algebra class. That'll help a lot. Um, or logic, taking just logic. You can take a logic class online. Um, Things that will help you pick apart the game in a way where you can understand it at its very core, and then learning how to not only tell others or explain to others that core, but explain it to them in a way that they may be able to understand it from a non like mathematical, logical, uh, or psychological background. Like if they don't have that formal training, that formal background, you need to be able to explain it to them in a way that they'll understand and learn it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. So, Cyrus, it was a pleasure to have you on here. We wish you the best of luck in the coming Latin American North Challenger Series. But other than that, that'll be it for the Dream this week, and we hope to see you all next week.